3 suspects are still at large after a mass shooting at a Scarborough pub that left 12 people injured. We're taking you inside for a closer look at the crime scene tonight.
And Doug Ford implements a tariff of his own today as Canada takes on the U.S. in a trade war. We're going to tell you more about Ontario's tax on electricity to the U.S.
And Mark Carney will become Canada's next prime minister. What happens now? And when could Canadians be heading to the polls?
And you know what? Spring-like weather, it has arrived just in time for March break. We're chatting with families about how they're spending the week.
You're watching Live at 5.
Good evening. I'm Bakari Savage.
And I'm Lena Latafat. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Live at 5. We begin with Friday night's mass shooting at a Scarborough pub, which left 12 people injured.
Investigators say that suspects openly fired indiscriminately. And tonight, we have images from inside the Piper Arms pub. Those images show walls, windows, and a TV riddled with bullets. As CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan joins us live with this story. Steve.
Yeah, Bakari and Lena, it certainly was a devastating crime scene. We did get a look inside earlier today, and as you said, there's all kinds of bullet holes scattered throughout the entire place. TV was smashed as a result of being hit by bullets as well, and there was glass shards everywhere around the pub. So this comes on a Saturday night. Police say that it happened at 10:30 on Friday night. Now, we do know that Piper Arms had its grand opening on Friday night. So is that a mere coincidence that these 3 masked men enter this place and shoot it up, or is that just, does that have something to do with the opening of this bar itself? That'll be part of the investigation. The police will make a determination as to whether or not the brand new opening was connected with the shooting. Nonetheless, they will continue with this investigation, looking for witnesses, trying to establish some sort of motive, and they'll do that by speaking to those that were in the club on Friday night. Now, we did speak with Councillor Thompson out front of this club earlier on today, and we got reaction from others as well. Here's more from all of them. Let's listen.
The callous nature in which the perpetrators brought violence to our community, it's frightening because they're still out there. And so because of what we experience here at this establishment, they seem to be heartless, seem to be willing to respond with gun and violence and so on. And so that's very, very problematic.
A friend of mine texted me from England and said, "Are you okay?" And then I got up and I watched the news and saw it, and that's all we knew about it.
It's really scary. I hope they can find it, and and to give justice to all the people out there that was hurt.
So 2 points. The police will again try to make a connection with the opening and the shooting. Are they connected or are they not? And of course, they cannot ignore the tow truck violence that we've seen throughout, particularly here in Scarborough. We reported on a murder up in Markham on Friday as well. So was that part of this shooting? That'll all be part of the investigation. They'll include that information or exclude it at some point in time. I'll send it back to you guys.
All right, Steve Ryan, live at the scene of a mass shooting in Scarborough. Thank you for this, Steve. Switching gears, let's get a check on the commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa and CIM. Well, it's the first day of the March break. How are the roads looking?
Pretty busy, you know. It's rush hour, and you'd think that maybe be a bit lighter because of March break. Not the case. And then in the mix, a couple of problems. So if you're headed on the 401, traveling on the eastbound side in the collectors, just as you make your way past the 410, 403, collision where a vehicle ended up in that grassy median does have that left lane as well as the left shoulder occupied. Now, if your travels take you on to the northbound lanes of the 404, this is at the start of the ramp that takes you to Steeles. It's the right lane that is blocked. It's the on-ramp from Steeles onto the northbound 404. So that's creating all sorts of slowdowns for your commute. And if you're traveling towards the Gardiner, it's pretty busy as you make your way out of the downtown core. The delays actually start from Cherry Street and they continue all the way out towards Dufferin. I'll send it back to you both.
This CP24 traffic report is brought to you by 407 ETR. Enjoy the journey with a stress-free commute.
Thanks, Adjoa. Well, the financial markets were down dramatically on both sides of the border today amid concern over the impact of Donald Trump's tariffs.
The Dow Jones closed down by 890 points after falling more than 1,000 points to start the trading week. Canadian stocks also dropped today. The S&P and TSX went down some 400 points today. This is all due to the uncertainty of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff policies and questions about how much the U.S. economy could suffer.
And for a closer look at the numbers in these markets, we turn to Amber Kanwar, former BNN host and now host of the In the Money with Amber Kanwar podcast on how to ride this roller coaster. Good to see you, Amber, and thanks so much for joining us. Look, the markets hate volatility, and we're seeing a lot of that these days. First of all, what do you make of these numbers?
I mean, it is stunning, not just the drops that we've seen, but putting it in historical context, particularly for the U.S. markets. Those tech stocks have been the real beacon of strength ever since the pandemic. And right now, they're the worst performing. The NASDAQ doesn't just fall 4% anytime. In fact, this is the worst performance that we've seen for the NASDAQ 100 since 2022. So these are severe drops, not just in the context of the last couple of weeks, but in the context of years.
Okay, so Amber, I have to get your take on this. So Howard Lutnick, he's, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, he's doubling down that there is no sign of a recession to come. What type of effect does this language have on the markets that we're seeing?
I think it's less what Howard Lutnick said and more what Donald Trump said over the weekend that is really rattling markets. Since Donald Trump has been elected, markets took comfort in the fact that Donald Trump views the stock market as his scorecard. He views the economy as his report card. But over the weekend on Fox, Trump said, we might have to prepare for a little bit of digestion, maybe even indigestion. He said, I don't really look that much at the market. This was a real wake-up call for investors who thought, while tariffs may be bad policy, Trump is not going to take it to the extreme because he cares what the markets say. By him basically saying, I don't really care. I think that we can be in for a little bit of short-term pain is really what has the market so unnerved. So when a company like Delta Airlines, for example, just reported quarterly results about 20 minutes ago, at the end of last year, so just a couple of months ago, they were talking about sunny skies in travel, how demand was robust. Right now, the stock is falling because they just warned about their profit outlook. What is some of the consequences that these tariffs are having on real people? They don't want to travel. They're worried about their checkbook. Certainly from a cross-border perspective, there might be diminished appetite to go to the U.S. and vice versa, given the tensions we're seeing between Canada and the U.S. So these are very real effects that businesses are feeling. And now investors don't feel like Trump does have their back.
So I'm sure you're getting a lot of phone calls from people who are nervous about their investments, people who are really anxious about this moment. What are you telling them? How should people react to this volatility, Amber?
I mean, it sounds sort of cliche to say, but you do have to consult your advisor and ask, what are your goals? Are you in it for the long term? When markets sell off, it's never for a pleasant reason. It's always, always for a scary reason. The financial crisis was real and it was scary. The pandemic was real and it was scary. And I don't want to say that this is an order of magnitude, but it is a sell-off and that can feel real and scary. But if you're in it for the long term, history does show that these can be buying opportunities. Does mean, though, that you have to be nimble. Where are you going to find safety in these difficult times? Increasingly, investors have been finding safety in gold. And the Canadian markets actually have a ton of gold stocks. And it's one of the reasons that the Canadian markets are actually outperforming the U.S. markets. It might seem counterintuitive, right? Because the U.S. tariffs are meant to damage our economy. But the stock market is actually proving more resilient in Canada than it is in the U.S. right now.
Yeah, and even though the losses are just on paper, it still hurts. All right, Amber Kanwar. Right. Amber Kanwar, host of In the Money with Amber Kanwar podcast. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks, Amber. Good to have you on. And sticking with the trade war, Ontario, we know, is responding in a really big way. A 25% surcharge is now in effect on all electricity being exported to the U.S. from Ontario.
Okay, right now, let's go to CP24's Phil Perkins, who joins us live from the newsroom. for the latest on the province's response to the trade war. Phil.
Well, Carolina, Premier Doug Ford is, again, being very aggressive with this, as he has been since Donald Trump talked about these tariffs, which are implemented last week. And he is following through on the promise that he made just a couple of weeks ago, and that is putting a 25% tariff on electricity that is sent to the U.S., specifically to 1.5 million homes in the states of New York, Minnesota, and Michigan. Now, the way this electricity is shared, this is surplus power that we make too much of, and then we send over to those specific 3 states, particularly when we are not using it. So mainly at nighttime or on weekends, that's when we sell it to our American cousins. And so with this 25% tariff, Premier Ford said today in an announcement that this will cost Americans on average an extra $100 Canadian per month on their electricity or their utility bills, and could make Ontario anywhere between $300,000 and $400,000 per day in revenues. And it wouldn't also just affect those living in those 3 states. We do understand that those states sometimes sell that electricity, that power, to other states like the state of Ohio, just nearby to Michigan. So this could have reverberating effects across the U.S. So here is Premier Ford, as well as Energy Minister Stephen Lecce, talking a little bit more about this decision.
Believe me when I say I do not want to do this. I feel terrible for the American people, because it's not the American people who started this trade war. It's one person who's responsible. That's President Trump. I'd rather be working together. I want to sell the U.S. more energy, more electricity, more critical minerals. I want to make Canada and the United States the richest, most successful, safest, most secure 2 countries on the planet. But as Premier, my #1 job is to protect the people of Ontario.
We are 30 times a net exporter. They need our power. We have the supply and demand systems in place by our systems operator. We'll be okay in Ontario. This is about maximizing pressure on America and minimizing the impacts on Ontario.
And speaking of pressure, Premier Ford also said that he won't just stop at these 25% tariffs, guys. He also said that if push comes to shove, he will outright shut out the power. So just keep it here on this side of the border and shut out those 3 states, and even more so after that. Back to you guys.
Okay, just the beginning of what could be a lot more in this trade war. CP24's Phil Perkins joining us live from the newsroom. Thanks, Phil.
No problem.
It's now 5:12. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, a man is in hospital after a stabbing downtown. We'll tell you more about the search for a suspect. We'll be right back.
Okay, one man was stabbed downtown.
Chopper 24 flew over that scene at Yonge and Bloor, and officers responded shortly after 2 o'clock this afternoon for reports of a man with a stab wound. He was transported to hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries, and police say they arrested one suspect and they're searching for another in connection with this incident. Details of that suspect remain unknown.
And one person's in custody after an assault at Warden Station. So police and paramedics, they were called to the TTC station at 6:40 this morning. And police say a man in his 40s was assaulted on the subway platform. He was taken to hospital. His injuries are minor.
Well, crews had to tackle a 2-alarm fire in Brampton this morning.
And firefighters responded to a home on Orchid Drive. This is in the McLaughlin Road and Sandalwood Parkway area. It was shortly before 5:30. Brampton Fire says that everyone who was inside the home at the time, they all made it out safely. And police say that it appears the fire started in the garage.
Then I started screaming in the house and said, there's a fire. And the kids, they woke up because they heard me screaming. So they woke up and they grabbed the 2 dogs, and we just grabbed our coat and just run out.
As did, or how much it'll cost to fix the damage. Well, 2 men have been charged in connection with a fire that ripped through a row of townhomes under construction in Fort Erie.
Emergency crews were called to the area of Allen Trail and Whispering Woods Trail Saturday morning. This video shows the structures fully engulfed in flames. Initial estimates show damage around $400,000. No injuries were reported as a result of the fire, but 36-year-old Michael Megan and 45-year-old Jason Batt, they're both charged with break and enter to commit mischief.
Toronto police are asking a teenager tonight.
17-year-old Luja was last seen in the Yonge and Finch area. They're described as being 5'5" with a medium build, brown and red hair, and wearing glasses. Investigators say that they are concerned for Luja's safety. Anyone with information, you ask to call police.
5:16, 9 degrees out there. You're watching Live at 5.
Prime Minister in waiting, former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, is the new Liberal leader after winning on the first ballot. We're going to have more on what happens next coming up. Liberal leader and soon-to-be Prime Minister Mark Carney spent the day on Parliament Hill.
Carney emerging from meetings with ongoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and caucus. In the coming days, Carney will need to be sworn in as Prime Minister, choose a new cabinet, and sort out his plans for the upcoming federal election. But the timeline for all of this remains unclear. Carney overwhelmingly won the Liberal leadership last night with more than 80% support on the first ballot.
I went to caucus today because you start as you mean to go on. And we are a Liberal team, and so it's incredibly important for me to hear directly from the members of caucus the concerns of Canadians on the ground, their priorities. As I said last night, they're the voices of their communities and they're the conscience of the party. There's tremendous energy in that group. We know this is a crucial time for our country. We're united to serve Canadians, and we will build this country.
And several cabinet ministers spoke on Parliament Hill this afternoon, including Melanie Joly, who says that the focus is on responding to the Trump administration's tariffs.
I think when it comes to President Trump, it's clear that he respects strength. And I think that Canadians right now, because of what's going on with the tariff war that the U.S. launched against us, Canadians are mad. We're insulted about all this rhetoric regarding the 51st state and our former prime minister being called governor. So we think that's unacceptable. And that's why it is important that the new prime minister sends a clear message, unites Canadians, and more we're united, more will win.
And Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre held a news conference on the Hill today. He says Carney is just like Trudeau. That's something he's been saying for a little while now. He also claims the Liberals are trying to, quote, trick Canadians.
We have the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal advisors, the same Liberal promises who will produce the same Liberal results. Doubling housing costs, doubling the debt, doubling lineups at food banks, enriching the global elites at the expense of the working class, and making our economy more helpless and reliant on the Americans than ever before. Now, Mark Carney is trying to hide from his record over the last 5 years of advising Trudeau in favor of raising carbon taxes, money printing inflation, and blocking resource projects, all while he moved his company headquarters and jobs to the United States.
And Premier Doug Ford congratulated Carney on his win during a news conference. That was this morning.
It's never been more important to build big things here in Ontario and across our country, including and especially the Ring of Fire. To do so, the federal government needs to get out of our way. They need to get behind these nation-building projects so we can build a more prosperous and secure future for Canada. I also want to thank Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for his many years of service to Canada. You know, we didn't always agree, but when it mattered, Prime Minister Trudeau was always willing to put party and ideology aside for the good of the country.
And a new survey suggests how to handle Donald Trump is going to be the biggest issue in the upcoming federal election. 36% of Canadians polled by Nanos Research for CTV News said dealing with the U.S. president was the most important issue that will influence how they vote. And Trump has launched a trade war with Canada and repeatedly attacked Canadian sovereignty by threatening to use economic force to make it the 51st state. The poll found that the next most important issue was the economy. At 29% of voters are scheduled to go to the polls in October at the latest.
It's 5:22, 9 degrees out there now. You're watching Live at 5.
Well, March break, it's begun. So we're going to check in on how the first day is going. That's next. That'll be with CP24's Melissa Duggan. She's out and about talking to people. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. It's the first day of March break, and it also happens to be the warmest day of the year so far. Talk about perfect timing.
That's right. Let's go live to CP24's Melissa Duggan, who's downtown. Hey, Melissa.
It's blue. The sun is shining. We are having a blast. And we're just hanging out with some friends. How is March break going so far?
It's going pretty good, isn't it, guys?
Yeah. Give me your reviews.
So we a few weeks ago we came back from Disney.
So we've got a long story, okay? And then what happened?
So where are we going tonight?
We are going to
What's that place?
the aquarium.
Okay, what do you hope to see inside there?
Sharks.
Sharks. What do you want to see?
Seahorse.
Seahorse. Love the sunglasses too. What do you want to see?
I'm going to see a jellyfish.
A jellyfish. Oh, terrific! And you're doing the heavy lifting here.
I'm just going to try to keep up.
We have a play, and it's Finding Nemo, and I'm Sheldon, the seahorse.
So you have experience with seahorses then. And what do you think about this gorgeous weather?
It's lovely.
Isn't it nice? You could be outside, walking with the family, having a good time. Listen, you have a terrific time at the aquarium. Thanks so much for saying hello. They're hanging out here from Oshawa today. Definitely talking to a lot of people doing the very same thing. Going to the aquarium, going to the top of the CN Tower, and just embracing this lovely break. You know, there is so much happening in the world right now. When you could take advantage of this moment away from the regular routine, boy, it sure is enjoyable. I've talked to a lot of people here today about their plans for the March break. I want to share a little more of what they had to say. Have a listen.
It is really awesome. Like, my mother's here from my back hometown, so it is really going awesome. We just visited CN Tower like last week, and now we visited the Ripley's Aquarium. It is really good, and yeah, just visiting the downtown streets now.
I had like my midterms like the last week. I just finished them, and I'm just chilling right now.
You're free.
Yeah, I am.
Good. Yes. It's been like fun here to explore.
Okay, so it's been fun. That's exactly what you want to hear on March break. Lots to do as well. We know that there's free admission for kids at places like the Art Gallery of Ontario, the Museum of Contemporary Art, some 10 history museums across the city. Still a chance to learn if the kids are interested in something like that over this break. And certainly the weather is something to enjoy. Bakari and Lena, we're seeing highs this week into the double digits. Definitely something to embrace after that long, cold winter that we had.
Yeah. The weather could not be more right this week. Great timing, and it sounds like the kids are having a great time too. Melissa, thanks so much for this.
Yeah.
You're watching Live at 5 on Toronto's Breaking News, CP24.
Well, the financial markets are down dramatically on both sides of the border today. This is all amid concern over the impact of Trump's tariffs. We're going to have the latest on the trade war next. Three suspects are still at large after a mass shooting at a Scarborough pub that left 12 people injured. We're taking you inside for a closer look at the crime scene.
Doug Ford implements a tariff of his own today as Canada takes on the U.S. in a trade war. We'll tell you more about Ontario's tax on electricity to the U.S.
And Mark Carney will become Canada's next prime minister. So what happens now? And when could Canadians be heading to the polls?
And spring-like weather has arrived just in time for March break. We're chatting with families and the kiddos about how they're enjoying the week.
This is Live at 5.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lena Latafat.
Now, Bakari Savage. Stock markets on both sides of the border. They took a steep tumble today as the reality of a U.S.-Canada trade war took further hold.
The Dow Jones closed down by 890 points after falling more than 1,000 points to start the trading week. Canadian stocks also dropped today. The S&P and TSX went down some 400 points today. This is all due to the uncertainty of U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff policies and questions about how much the U.S. economy could suffer. Donald Trump refuses to rule out fears of a recession. He was asked about that today, and CTV's political analyst Eric Ham says Trump's tariffs are going to take a toll on the American economy, which goes against what he campaigned on.
Voters elected Donald Trump because they thought he could actually handle and deal with the issue of inflation. He could bring prices down and that he could actually move the economy. And what we are seeing right now, the economy is looking increasingly more stagnant, and Donald Trump appears to actually be waving the white flag, suggesting that there's not much that he can do, and not promising with his usual bluster that there will not be an economic downturn.
Well, a 25% surcharge is now in effect on all electricity being exported to the U.S. from Ontario.
Let's bring in CP24's Phil Perkins for the latest on the province's response to this trade war. Phil, Doug Ford is not backing down here.
No, he's not backing down from this 25% tariff on surplus power that we send to the U.S., particularly to the states of New York, Minnesota, and Michigan. That's 1.5 million homes. He's also not stopping at suggesting that he could shut off power entirely. So this is not all our power. This is surplus power. So whenever Ontarians aren't using enough electricity, primarily on evenings and weekends, the province sells it to these states. Now, with this 25% tariff, which kicks in today, that could cost the average household in those states I was talking about around $100 Canadian more per month. In return, it would make Ontario anywhere between $300,000 and $400,000 a day in revenue. However, this would not just affect those three states. What we understand is that those states sometimes sell our power to other states, potentially to states like Ohio nearby. And so it could actually affect more than just those three states. So here is Premier Ford talking about how he is not shy about potentially shutting off power. We're also going to hear from CTV political analyst Eric Ham about what this means for Trump.
He changes his mind literally every single day. So I just wouldn't want to give you an exact date. But make no mistake about it, if he continues to attack our province, our country, taking jobs, families' paychecks, food off their table until they can't pay rent, I will do whatever it takes to maximize the pain against the American, and I hate saying Americans because it's not them, against President Trump.
There are growing concerns in the United States of a looming recession that is going to hit the entire economy. In fact, we're seeing today markets are continuing to reel on this possibility of a recession. And of course, even though Donald Trump continues to double down on this idea of looming tariffs on Canada as well as Mexico, what we are seeing play out right now is this is becoming increasingly politically a disadvantage for Donald Trump. And what's so striking is amidst all of this, we are seeing right now Donald Trump's own party is struggling to fund the government with only 5 days until a potential government shutdown.
And Premier Ford has really been leading the charge for most Canadian politicians right now because he's actually in power, making decisions. And he's trying to get other premiers to follow his way in terms of implementing tariffs on energy. He's pleading for Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, to potentially think about putting tariffs on oil, calling her the Trump card. But at this point, she's not showing any signs that she could be doing that. Of course, remember a couple weeks ago, Danielle Smith was in Mar-a-Lago meeting with Donald Trump face to face. So I think Premier Ford trying to recruit some more power, maybe someone who actually has spoken to Donald Trump in person. Thank you.
Yeah, the Alberta Premier has a very different point of view.
Yep.
Phil Perkins reporting live. Thanks, Phil. It's now 5:35, 9 degrees. Let's get a check on the evening commute with CP24's traffic specialist, Adjoa and CAF. A lot of families out there trying to take advantage of the March break, Adj.
You know what they are, and the drive looks more like a regular rush hour, especially if you're on the 401 where you're running into problems as well. So this is on the westbound lanes of the 401, right underneath the McCowan Bridge. You'll find only the left lane getting by in the express following this ongoing multi-vehicle collision. Very, very slow as a result as you do make your way from as far back as Nielsen. If you are trying to do the smart thing, stick with the collectors. It's moving a little bit better. And then further west on the 401, it's on the ramp that takes you to the southbound DVP. Looks like they blocked the ramp, so it's not accessible anymore. You can still access it via the collectors, but if you're headed that way on the southbound DVP just over the 401, you have emergency crews that are blocking the left lane, so also creating big backups. Northbound on the Don Valley Parkway, not moving off the Gardner, continues slow to approaching Eglinton. That's where you're running into this collision as well. On the approach to Eglinton, it's in the two left lanes. We are dealing with some problems if you're making your way out, traveling towards Brantford, westbound on the 403 at Wayne Gretzky Parkway. All lanes closed for a multi-vehicle crash. I'll send it back to you both.
All right, thanks a lot, Adj.
You're welcome.
We begin with Friday night's mass shooting. This is at a Scarborough pub, which left 12 people. We're going to have an update for you right now.
Yeah, investigators say 12 people injured, that is. Investigators say suspects opened fire indiscriminately. And tonight, we have images from inside that pub, the Piper Arms. And those images show walls, windows, and a TV riddled with bullets. CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan joins us live with those details. Steve.
Yeah, Alina Bakari, it really is a miracle that nobody was more seriously injured as a result of the inside of that pub being sprayed with bullets by 3 suspects. Police tell us that 2 of those suspects, all were masked, by the way. 2 of them had handguns, 1 had a long rifle, and Piper Arms had its grand opening on Friday. Friday night at 10:30 is when these 3 suspects went into the pub and just shot indiscriminately at whoever they could hit. We did learn today that there are now 7 people who are either hit by a bullet or grazed by a bullet, 7 of the 12, and there are no deaths to report, thankfully. So the police will now, in their investigation, look at the opening of this pub on Friday and see if there's any nexus. Is there a connection between that shooting and the opening of the pub? They will look at it from a big lens, though, not to include it right away. You treat something as coincidental until you learn that it's not coincidental. Earlier on as well, we did speak with several witnesses, or residents rather, that were walking past here on the sidewalk, and I interviewed Councillor Michael Thompson. He's been here since Saturday as well, and here's some of those conversations. Let's listen.
It was scary. Like, you never know what could happen anywhere. Doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in.
It's really, really scary because they can hurt anybody. They can go anywhere to just do the same thing. I think the police are doing their best with what they're dealt with.
These guns are not produced here in our city, in our province. These guns are coming in primarily from the United States. And there's a lot of chatter now about fentanyl and the prevention of fentanyl from Canada. I've heard the president and the vice president state that fentanyl is killing Americans, and yet American guns are killing and maiming and injuring our residents.
So just like the question, does the opening of this pub have anything to do with the shootings? They will also look at the tow truck turf wars that have been going on recently, especially here in Scarborough. They'll look to see if those had anything to do with the shooting as well. Again, they treat everything as a separate incident, and if something happens to match with the evidence, well, then they will include it. I'll send it back to you guys.
All right, CP24's crime analyst Steve Ryan. Thanks a lot, Steve. It's now 5:39. It's 9 degrees. This is Live at 5.
And coming up, the Prime Minister in waiting. Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney is now the Liberal leader after winning on the first ballot. What happens more on, we'll have more on rather, what happens next coming up. Welcome back. Liberal leader and soon-to-be Prime Minister Mark Carney spent the day on Parliament Hill.
Carney emerging from the meetings with outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and caucus. In the coming days, Carney will need to be sworn in as Prime Minister, choose a new cabinet, and sort out his plans for the coming federal election. But the timeline for all of this, it remains unclear. So Carney overwhelmingly won the Liberal leadership last night with more than 80% support on first ballot.
We discussed the most important issues for our country, obviously including Canada and U.S. relations, issues of national security, and, yes, the transition between the Prime Minister and myself. That transition will be seamless.
And several cabinet ministers spoke on the Hill this afternoon, including Anita Anand, who considered not running in the next election.
Mark Carney encouraged me to throw my hat in the ring again, but so did thousands of Canadians across the country, including in my riding of Oakville, who wrote and called and texted and emailed and said, we really want you to stay on. Couple that with the crisis that we are in right now, economically, facing 25% tariffs from the United States, and my work as the Minister of Internal Trade, meant that this is not the moment for me to return to academia. I do hope to return at some point, but now is the time for us all, regardless of what we do in our daily lives, to stand up and fight for our country as patriotically as possible.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre held a news conference on Parliament Hill today. So he's saying that he's the best choice when it comes to facing U.S. President Trump, not Mark Carney.
Canadians have a choice in the next election. Do they want to give the Liberals a 4th term in power after they drove up housing costs, food prices, and taxes, blocked resource projects, and made us more reliant on Trump's America? Or do they want Canada First Conservatives who will axe taxes, build homes, unleash production of our resources, and bring home paychecks, production, and sovereignty to our country?
And as the saying goes, timing is everything. With more on the next moves for the Liberal Party, we turn to Liberal strategist Sharon Kaur, partner at Sovereign Advisory and former Deputy Chief to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Good to see you, Sharon. Thanks for joining us tonight. Look, Mark Carney made a very big splash with his decisive victory last night. A lot of people are talking about that today. What are you hearing from party insiders? Do the Liberals feel like they have a shot at this thing again?
So I spent a lot of time yesterday while I was in Ottawa talking to caucus members, folks who were in from the community. And honestly, it was a really interesting moment because there was a shift in everyone's attitude. There was excitement. If I talked to these same individuals and caucus members, say a couple months ago, there was a lot of deflated feelings around how they were feeling in their communities and what they were hearing. And that has turned around completely. And I think that's a sign of renewal in a party. Listen, Prime Minister Trudeau did a lot of great things for the Liberal Party, but the last several years went in a bit of a different direction, and people on the ground felt that in addition to a global pandemic, cost of living, with Mark Carney, the Prime Minister designate, we're seeing that revival we saw back in 2015. So I do think people are excited.
Okay, you just mentioned this. Mark Carney's not the Prime Minister just yet. He's the Prime Minister designate. So what happens next? Walk us through this.
So there's a lot of things that need to happen. He was there today. He met with caucus, but there needs to be an official transfer of power. So when they will go to the Governor General and do all the shiny stuff they need to, but he needs to officially be sworn in into Privy Council and all of that. So I'm guessing that's going to happen very soon, in the next day or two. And I'm guessing he will also have a newish cabinet that he can call his own. But what we're seeing right now is like he's doing all the things that he needs to do. And I think shortly after he does all that, I think we're also going to see an election called, because he wants to be able to come in this with a fresh approach, fresh team, or refreshed team of some sort.
The public opinion polls do have the Liberals catching up here, but the Conservatives are still in the lead, and Pierre Poilievre is, I'm sure, feeling a bit nervous, but still feeling good about that part. If you were advising the Liberals today, Sharon, would you tell them to call an election sooner than later?
Absolutely. I'd say call it now. It's so I've been talking to a lot of folks from the Conservative side as well, because they were flying high for quite some time in the polls. And we have to keep in mind, we are dealing with the Trump effect in the polls. President Donald Trump has united Canada in a way that we haven't seen since before COVID, even before 2019. And if I were telling the Prime Minister designate what to do in this situation, I would say get your cabinet in, get sworn in, but don't waste any time, call an election, because we need to get back to business, and we do need to deal with tariffs and Donald Trump. But the Liberals they're seeing an uptake in the polls they haven't seen in quite some time in the last year. So I would say go quick and fast.
Okay, so along with that, voters are saying that the most important thing is standing up to U.S. President Donald Trump. How important is it for Carney to form the right cabinet to make a statement here? Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely vital. So there's a few things, though, because you have to form a new cabinet without upsetting too many other cabinet ministers that might get moved or get taken out. Politics can be very sensitive when you're dealing with a lot of egos as well and people. So he has to tread very carefully that he puts his most competent people up. He also has to tread carefully to show a refresh. There's a lot of really talented people in cabinet and caucus that maybe shouldn't be in the certain roles that they're in. So I definitely think we're going to see a smaller cabinet. We're going to see a more succinct cabinet, and this cabinet, or whatever cabinet comes after the election, if they do win, it's going to have to be the cabinet that takes on the U.S. And until then, we're all going to rely on our Captain Canada, Doug Ford, to get us to the finish line while the feds get their elections done.
Strategist and partner at Sovereign Advisory. Thanks so much for your insights. Always good to chat with you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
It's now 5:48. This is Live at 5.
Coming up, Toronto taxi companies are urging the city of Toronto to extend its Buy Canadian campaign to the roads. We're going to have more on that message next. Welcome back. Well, as the trade war with the U.S. continues, Toronto taxi companies, they're urging the city to extend its Buy Canadian campaign to the roads.
Right now, we're joined live by Christine Hubbard, Operations Manager for Beck Taxi. And Christine, also, I want to start with this. We did receive a statement from Uber Canada, basically saying Uber Canada is run by Canadians for Canadians and that Uber Canada is headquartered in Toronto.
So Uber Canada isn't really a real thing. Uber has subsidies all around the world. And what we know is that Uber's CEO donated $1 million to Donald Trump's inauguration fund, and Uber, the company, did the same. So to say that this is a Canadian company or for Canadians in any way, shape, or form is, as disingenuous as Uber usually is.
Okay, let's talk more about this letter and the message behind it. This has been signed by Beck Co-op, Toronto One Taxi, and Hover, I think I should say. Hover?
Yep.
Okay, got that right. Tell us more about why all of you wanted to sign this letter.
Well, I think we all have one job right now. The idea is that we are doing our best as Canadians to shop local and support Canadian small businesses. The companies that you mentioned, including Hover, which is an up-and-coming ride-hailing app, which would be, something that would compete with Uber and Lyft. We're all here, and luckily for Toronto, we have a vibrant and a great taxi service, unlike a lot of cities. And in other cities, it's because Uber and Lyft have absolutely monopolized and then crushed any kind of competition. And this is exactly what we're trying to avoid. We don't want to be subject to only these American Goliath companies who do pretend like they're part of the local community. It's just not the reality.
So what's next for the everyday, riders who rely on these rideshare companies? Because, some people may not want to take taxi cabs because they don't feel comfortable because of whatever biases or previous incidents.
Of course. So you're not going to encounter any kind of issues that you might if you're trying to flag a taxi if you download the Beck Taxi app, for example. Hover, again, is an up-and-coming Canadian brand that is very much modeled after the Uber and Lyft business model, but they're committed to making sure that drivers get paid. And this would be the thing that I think is most important. If someone's in an Uber and they're paying $35 for a ride to the airport, it's very likely that the driver is getting about $12 of that money, and the rest is going to the U.S. In a taxi, and likely with Hover or the other companies that signed this letter, the driver is getting exactly what you see that you are paying. Drivers pay, in our case, for example, almost like a subscription fee. And if they decide they no longer want to market with Beck, they take their independently licensed small businesses. So this is the difference too. A taxi is its own small business, and they actually have the freedom to sign up with a company or work independently. They can have access to apps, and you won't find the issues that you're worried about when you might be flagging if you just download, again, the Beck Taxi app and order that way. It's the same experience, but now you're with someone who's commercially insured and getting paid fairly for the work that they're doing.
Okay, just want to point out that we did hear back from Mayor Olivia Chow, spokesperson, who says the city is looking into this, and it has sent a rideshare licensing plan back to staff for review. As you can see, we've got that statement up there. It says we're reviewing options with the mayor's economic action team about how best to support workers and businesses in all sectors in response to Donald Trump's unjustified trade war. And it does go on to say that the mayor does support made in Canada businesses. She does support local businesses, especially at this crucial time. Christine Hubbard, it's been great to get you on and to get your perspective. Thank you for this.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Right now it's 5:55. This is Live at 5.
Well, March break has begun. We're going to check in on how the first day is going. That's next. Melissa Duggan chatting with families. Stay with us. Oh, to be a kid again. It's the first day of March break, and it also happens to be the warmest day of the year so far. The weather is certainly cooperating.
And CP24's Melissa Duggan caught up with some families taking it all in.
Well, it's day one, so March break's going great. Ask us in 5 days from now.
So today is CN Tower. We are thinking of Ripley's another day and the Toronto Railway Museum.
Lovely weather. It's bringing me back in summer times. Yes, it's lovely, and we have our newborn baby this year.
Oh, wonderful.
So we didn't get out a whole winter because it's snowy and we cannot risk our new baby. Now we can go out with our baby, and even us without jackets.
So many families having a great time. Well, Elon Musk says his social media platform X has been targeted by a massive cyber attack.
Yeah, Musk saying, quote, "We get attacked every day, but this was done with a lot of resources. Either a large coordinated group and or a country was involved." The website Down Detector has reported that tens of thousands of outages logged between its Canadian and American domains. More than 40,000 users reported no access to the program since this morning. The cause hasn't been determined.
Well, Doechii is Billboard's 2025 Woman of the Year.
Yeah, this puts the rapper in the same company as Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga. Doechii won the Grammy for Best Rap Album about a month ago, becoming the third woman to ever win in the category. She's going to be recognized at the Billboard Women in Music ceremony later this month.
It's 5:59, 9 degrees, feeling more like 7 out there. You're watching Toronto's breaking news, CP24.
Thank you for watching. CTV News at 6 is next.